You're a musician trying to start your own independent record label. This episode is for you. So I'm going to give you 5 tips that shares more or less how to start a record label, independent one nonetheless. So the very first thing, you actually want to get knowledge about what a record label is, and that is a record label is an entity or company that leverages intellectual property in terms of music by selling records. Now, records are different to the publishing. So music has two halves, and if you don't know this, you can head to the video in here somewhere. And record labels focus on the master recording or the recording or sound recording. They try and sell records. That's the gist of it. Record company sells records. Now you want to build up foundation, and since this is a business, you have to think in terms of business. A record label uses artists. Artists are technically employees and they make intellectual property. That is a record label. A lot of musicians tend to think, because I love music and I want to help musicians, I will make a record label. But that is not a business, that is technically a music charity. A record label is a business that makes music, or sound recordings to be exact. So they focus on leveraging intellectual property. To get you going onto understanding what a record label is, there are 5 books that I've read or thinking of reading, and audiobooks that I think will be useful. I'll leave that in the description below. Once you've read these books, you can move on to the next step. You have to identify and define your niche. So your niche is typically, what genre are you going to be focusing on? So especially when you're an independent record label, there's a lot of genres, but you have to focus and be the independent record label for this genre, and you focus on making music on that genre. So define your niche. Once you've defined your niche, you want to get going with the branding and the legal framework. So let's do branding first. The reason you want to do the branding first, it will give you what name you want to call the record label, how a record label, what persona. So do you want to be the professional 35 to 40-year-old hip hop record label, or do you want to be the young, hip and current 20 to 23-year-old type of music record label? That will give you 2 different names for the kind of record label you want. So that's why I said branding first. Get the names, get the colors, get the themes, get the idea, the philosophy, more or less like a business plan of how is this record label, a business, going to operate. Once you get the branding done, do the legal work. The legal work is fairly broad, and I highly suggest you go read those 5 books because there's a lot of legal work. So this is just a summary of what the legal work is. You want to set up a company. The company is separate to you as an individual. So you always have to think as, okay, I am the company, or this is me personally as a musician. So you're thinking as the company now. You register a company, then typically in South Africa, we do the PTY Ltd. So, or you can decide on another way if you want to keep it smaller, but I highly suggest you set up a company. And then once you've set up a company, you want to get the legal framework in terms of the contracts you want. But if you want to get those contracts, you kind of have to know how you're going to set up your business. So that's why legal framework is a broadish one. Now, a record label is fairly broad because it can make money in various kind of ways. So having a business plan after the branding is probably what you should be doing next. But the least of the framework, you want to just register the company. Once the company is registered, get the legal framework and how the money is going to flow. So how are you going to make money? Where is the money going to come in for the first initial releases, because you'll be running at a loss? And how will you get that money back from the artists? So there are various type of frameworks you can do to get there. Are you going to take money from everything, 360 type deal? Are you just going to take money from recordings? Are you also going to be involved in marketing? The more you are involved in the artist's development, the more you can take from their back-end royalties. So you want to understand what kind of business model you want to operate on. This is dependent on what resources you have. The more money you have to put into a musician, the more money you can take. It's weird how it works, but generally speaking, the more money you have, the more money you can take from the artist side of royalties. The next, move on to the legal framework. So now you've understand, okay, this is how I'm going to make money from all these musicians. So you may get in contact with an entertainment lawyer or a lawyer that's somewhat familiar with entertainment law, and you get a contract set up on how your business model lines up with an artist's requirements. Make the various kind of contracts, and then also underline the framework of the company. So if you're just going to be focusing on making recordings and not worrying about marketing, HR, etc., then you need less people in your business. But if you want to have a marketing division, a PR division, one that is talent scouting, R&D, then you need more people, so you need more contracts. So you actually need to frame out the company from beginning all the way to the end. Then once you've identified the structure you want, the type of business model, then you can get to the point of artist recruitment and scouting effectively. You want to find the artists that will match and align with the business. And obviously that means knowing the genre, the niche that your business is operating on. If you're really in the hip hop niche, you probably should not be focusing on making an amapiano type of album unless you are business savvy enough to understand the differences between the two type of industries. Then once you've got the scouting, you do the artist development side of things. So how do we get the artist from not knowing anything into them knowing their contract and them knowing what is expected of them in terms of getting your royalties back and the money. So a record label is almost like a bank for musicians, or it's weird. It doesn't work like employees and like a bakery, for example. A bakery, you employ employees, the employees get a set amount of money, and then they make your product, which is bread. But in terms of music, it's always like you get the artist, but you have to give them money up front. So the musicians are technically in debt to the record label until they break a certain point where they start covering the costs, that the loan effectively, and then they start getting money. So you have to understand the different mechanics of how your record label is going to work, and if you're going to be giving advances, or that's going to be not included, but you're going to take a bigger chunk in the royalties. But that's a business model type of development. So you have to understand how your whole business is going to work. Those 5 books will be really handy in understanding what I'm talking about right now. Lastly, marketing and distribution. The only way you're gonna make money is if people know about the music that is made in your record label. So marketing and distribution, marketing, getting it word of mouth, etc. And then distribution, getting it into the various channels. But that's also depending on what kind of genre you're working on. If you have a gospel record label, you could get away with just CDs. But if you're working in the hip hop pop space, you kind of need to be with a distribution company like CD Baby or TuneCore or DistroKid, which is what I use. And you have to get your music onto the other platforms, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, etc. But you want to be able to have a distribution network. But having a record label, first and foremost, it's a company that makes records. It's not a company to help musicians. No. It can help musicians, but the primary objective is to make music or records, sell those records, and make money at the end of the day. Don't treat it like your music career, which tends to be not as structured, but it is a business that needs to generate revenue from records. But don't forget to head over to my website, skillmusicsa.com/blog, and you can read the 5 books. There's 5 books that I highly recommend that you actually read through before you take on the effort on starting a record label. But that's it for now.